Your privacy notice must be very concise, very clear, and presented in an intelligent format and in a manner that is very accessible to the data subjects. Today, we'll be talking about an interesting topic and aspect of data protection law in Nigeria, and that is called the privacy notice. Before I delve into what is privacy notice and how it works, remember that in one of the videos we have made in the past, we talked about transparency as a critical and key principle for data protection in Nigeria. And what is transparency? Transparency requires that as a data controller, as an organization that processes personal data of people, you must inform them of why you need to process their personal data. So the data subjects must know in advance the type of personal data you are collecting and why you are collecting it and all that. That is transparency principle. And in order to implement and put this principle in practice, a privacy notice is needed, because a privacy notice is what you will use to inform the data subjects of the personal data you collect, why you collect it, and all that. So let's go into it. What is a privacy notice? In this video, you will understand not just what a privacy notice is, but also what it should contain, how you will present it to your data subjects, and most importantly, the time frame within which you must present it to the data subject. As a business organization that processes personal data of individuals, the law requires that you present them with a privacy notice. As you can recall from our previous videos, a personal data is any information that relates to any individual. So it may be the person's name, it may be the person's email address, contact address, and all that. So if as a business you collect people's names, like your employees' names or your customers' name, their bank accounts and all that, all those things are personal data. And if you are collecting personal data of customers or employees or your business partners, you must provide them with a privacy notice. Now, at what point in time does the law require that you provide data subjects privacy notice? Under the Nigerian Data Protection Act, before you collect the personal data of any individual, you must provide the individual with a privacy notice. But what happens in practice is that organizations will usually put their privacy notice in their websites. So typically, if you go to the website of most organizations, you will see their privacy notice. Now, as I said earlier, the law requires that you provide this notice to the data subject before you collect their personal data, not after, not during, but before. Now, what should a privacy notice contain? This area is very key, because if you have a privacy notice that contains some and not all of them, you'll be in violation of the law. And as you already know, there is penalty for this violation. A privacy notice will contain these things. Let me just list them for you, so that when you are preparing the privacy notice of your organization, you take these things into account while preparing them. Number one is the contacts of your organization. So you have to provide the name of your organization, the contact address of your organization, and if you have appointed a data protection officer, remember in one of our previous videos, we explained who a data protection officer is and all that. If your organization have appointed a data protection officer, then you must put the contact address of this data protection officer, so that the data subjects or even the regulators can contact this person if they have any concern with the way your organization processes personal data. Another thing you have to put in your privacy notice is your lawful basis. Again, in a previous video we made, we explained that for you to process the personal data of any person, you must have a lawful basis. And the lawful basis could be consent, it could be performance of a contract and all that, right? So the next thing you must have in your privacy notice is the categories of personal data you are collecting. So if you are collecting contact information of your employees or your customers, if you are collecting their account details, if you are collecting their whatever type of information you are collecting that relates to them, you must state it in your privacy notice that this is the information you are collecting. And in addition to that, you must go further and explain the purpose of the collection. So if you are collecting email address, for example, you explain why you are collecting that email address. If you are collecting residential address, you must explain why you are collecting the residential address. So for each type of personal data you collect, you explain why you are collecting it. This is to enable your data subjects understand why they are giving you their personal data and all that. So the next thing you have to provide in your privacy notice is the recipients of that personal data you are collecting. So if you are collecting the personal data and you are going to share it with any person, with any organization, whether the organization is in Nigeria or not in Nigeria. In fact, if the organization is outside Nigeria, it is even very important that you let the data subject know that you'll be sharing this personal data with other persons. So for example, if you go to a website where you buy stuffs online, say for example, Jumia or even Amazon and all that, there is a place where you make payments, right? And usually these organizations that allow you purchase online from their websites engages a third-party payment processor, and your personal information of the customers will be shared with this third-party payment processor. So in your privacy notice, you have to explain that the account information of your customers or their financial data will have to be shared with these payment processors for the purpose of processing any payment these customers make on your website, right? Another thing that you have to include in your privacy notice is the rights of the data subjects. The Nigerian Data Protection Act has made provisions for the various rights of a data subject. So you have to explain these rights to the data subject. For example, one of the rights of a data subject is the right to lodge a complaint to the Nigerian Data Protection Commission if they have any concern with how an organization processes their personal data. So you have to explain these things to the data subject. Another thing that must be contained in your privacy notice is the retention period. So what does this mean? How long do you want to keep this personal information that you have collected? You have collected people's personal data. Of course, you can't keep it forever. There must be a time frame. So that time frame, you have to explain it to the data subjects in your privacy notice. But what happens in practice is that it is usually difficult to know the exact time frame when you will delete or do away with the personal data you have collected so far. So companies have another policy called retention policy or retention schedule, where they have now outlined various time frames for doing away with personal data they have processed. So basically, this is what your privacy notice will have to contain. As we have said earlier, you have to provide all this information in your privacy notice, which you have to present to your data subjects before you collect this information from them, right? But where you have collected personal data from other sources, not directly from the data subjects, then you may not provide this information to them if they already have this information, or if providing this information will require disproportionate efforts from your side. So in that case, you may not necessarily provide this information to your data subjects. Now that you have understood what should be contained in your privacy notice, in what format does the law require that you present this privacy notice to your data subjects, right? So the law is very clear that your privacy notice must be very concise, very clear, and presented in an intelligent format and in a manner that is very accessible to the data subjects. That is why when you go to the website of many organizations, you see their privacy notices, because they are presenting it in a way that is easily accessible to their data subjects, right? When you are presenting this privacy notice, certain things need to be taken care of, right? For example, the language of presentation. You must use very clear and simple language so that your data subjects must understand. That's one. Two, you must consider the nature of your data subjects. So if you are providing services for children, that means you have to tailor your privacy notice. The language you use, you must tailor it to suit children. So if it means using pictures to explain these things to them, then you have to do that. Because you don't need to just write like a lawyer, for example, or engage a lawyer to write it for you. And a lawyer will write using verbose language that children may not understand. So you have to take into account the nature and age of your data subjects. We have come to the end of this episode. Thank you for watching. If you have not subscribed to our channel, please kindly do so. Turn on your notification and share these videos with your friends and colleagues so that they will join us in understanding the data protection laws of Nigeria.